you know. And Layla doesn't know any of this stuff. That both you and Amir lose sleep, lose money, you make continuous sacrifices. And then what's going to happen? She's going to be 18 in this culture. Maybe she's going to look at you and say, Mom, I think I want to go to Rhode Island. I want to study there. Why don't you go to Sierra College? Yeah, I know, but I want to go to that place. But why? It's so far away. Yeah, but you guys can come visit like once every decade. There is this poem. It's really quite beautiful. I don't know who the poet is. به حریم خلوت خود شبی چه شود که نهفته بخوانیم به کنار من بنشینی و به کنار خود بنشانیم من اگر چه پیرم و چه ناتوان تو مرا ز درگه خود مران که گذشته در غمت ای جوان همه روزگار جوانیم به حریم خلوت خود شبی چه شود که نهفته بخوانیم When David retired, he came a couple of times to Oakland and stayed with me a couple of days. And because of what he had done for me, for those 2-3 days that he was with me, I just allowed him to go to the classroom and teach the classes. All the stuff crazy things that he used to do in his own classes. And it was the least I could do. And I also realized that David is now retired. He doesn't have a stage to work on. He must feel some loss and grief. Yes, you're tired. Yes, you want to retire. Yes, you create this fantasy about retirement only to realize that, well, yeah, but there isn't much to do in retirement. The last 2 lines of the poem is, this father, this teacher, says to his son, let's just say, goes home and says, Dad, you've gotten really, really old. How did that happen? And the father looks at him and says, I was once young like you, but I spent all of my youth raising you, So I sacrificed my youth to kind of create you and raise you and protect you. And that's what teachers do for the most part. They're like candles. They illuminate, and every time they are lit, the wax slowly drops down like tears and their life slowly diminishes. There was this weekend that Hussein and Shadia came here, and this was when they didn't have a child, or maybe they did. The entire tribe was here. My parents were here. Sarah and Murtaza were here. And one day we went to Lake Shore. And it was at a point in my life where I had a lot of energy. I was very animated in the classroom. I wasn't the way I am now. Every question was answered with a story. I never used the board the way I do now. I didn't explain anything the way I do now. Everything was just like a story. Every 5 minutes, a student would come by and say hello. I never thought how that made Hussein feel. it make him envious, it he make him proud, that he took this 18 and 19-year-old punk, this young kid who was confused, who had zero culture, took this kid under his wings, and then for the next few years, they just talked. I mean, that's what it really was. We just went there, had some tea and talked. No one looked at anyone as a teacher, no one looked at anyone as a student. We were guests at his house. They were kind enough to give us some tea, some fruit, some dates sometimes, and then a conversation, and then we were off. And after that day when we came home, we were having a barbecue outside. Hussein comes and says to me, Amir, this was amazing. I said, Hussein, what? We were out for about 3 hours. 100 people came and said hello to you. Why didn't you run for mayor? And I think like a very proud parent, that you don't walk away from a teacher arrogantly. You don't forget your past. You don't forget who's made you, who's protected you. You know that you're always going to be a student, even though you may no longer depend on this person, but you're forever in this state of gratitude towards this person. That's how you walk away from a teacher, and that usually takes a while for you to understand, every time the kids don't listen in doing some schoolwork, it always takes me back to the hell I put my parents through, and then for a few minutes I like zone out. It's like I'm no longer here in this house. I'm no longer with the kids. I go all the way back to when I was young and my parents, it just tore them to pieces. And I say, well, first of all, what goes around comes around. Second, if they were that patient to house me, my own parents, I have no choice but to exercise the same patience. Sure, they were much younger than I am, but nevertheless. And the point is, and it's something we've talked about many times, this idea of gratitude. You could fake it, you could pretend, but they all lack the most important component, which is experience, first-hand experience. There is a scene in the movie Lucy. She has all these drugs inside her, and these drugs have opened these portals within her psyche, and now she begins to see things from inside. She looks at trees and she sees mathematical equations. She sees colors and just things being alive. She goes to the hospital and she demands, from this doctor to kind of open her up and take out this bag of drugs. And as this doctor is, cutting her open, she calls her mom and she thanks her. Because for the first time she understands how it was. She can actually take herself all the way back to when she was inside her mother's womb. And even her mother, says to her, it's impossible. You couldn't have remembered that. How can you remember that? Says, Mom, I just do. I remember everything. And without first-hand experience, almost every form of gratitude is a counterfeit. I mean, it's great that you have some social skills, and you can be respectful, but for the most part, it lacks substance. It really, 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 really does. Um, I go to, not anymore, but I sometimes just walk around and find myself at coffee shops or some place where I want to get like a burger or some coffee, and I run into an old student. They say, "Oh, hello, how are you doing?" I say, "Thank you, I'm doing well. What can I do for you?" "I just want a medium coffee." They give me the coffee and they say, "Okay, that's like $3.45. Okay. Now I understand about having a job, I understand about protecting your job, I understand about making money and all that stuff. I also understand that they could say, "I'm going to take care of this. I'll just pay for your coffee." And that's something that is missing, you know. And you won't ever be able to do that until you make some huge sacrifices for someone. And then you catch yourself that someone made the same sacrifices for you. If you don't walk away with gratitude, it means that you understand nothing. And the only way you can actually have a gratitude that is meaningful is, it's kind of like the story told to us by Nietzsche that, you're born a lamb, you're innocent, you're a child. Then you turn into a camel. Society robs you of all good things that live inside you. Then all of a sudden someone walks into your life and inspires you. Yes, you do have thorns inside you. Yes, you do have rocks inside you. But if you're blessed enough to have this teacher around you constantly, the thorns and the rocks will eventually go away. They'll eventually turn into compost and nourish the seed that they're planted within. But now that you have this seed inside you, now you become this lion. You're arrogant, like Socrates. You go around making everybody feel bad, because you're in such a dark place. A camel is good. Society gives you chores, you carry them. You say yes to them. But now that you realize that society is useless, the laws are useless, all the things you've been carrying are kind of meaningless, now you attack the people closest to you, and you pretend as if you understand. You understand zero. You're just this bundle of arrogance. I remember I had to do something at Laney, and I gave my class to someone to teach it for that one day. And in the morning, a student who had enrolled in both classes comes in and looks at this guy who taught my class and says to him, "You messed me up yesterday." And this kid kind of laughs very proudly, like he's done something, immensely good and useful. All he did was stole some ideas, copied and pasted some screaming and animation, gave the illusion that a 30-year-old kid understands. Zero humility. There has to come a point where you realize you're a fake. All you can do is ask good questions. But you don't even know why you ask. You're just angry because you called yourself being a camel for about 20 years. Now you just go around making other people feel bad because you feel like crap. if you have a teacher, because you can't do this on your own, if you have a teacher who can house you, protect you, educate you, another dragon needs to come out of you with that breathes fire, that destroys the arrogance that you're beginning to slowly understand. And now, after many, many years, you become this child again, this lamb again. You know, you've recovered your innocence, but it's filled with wisdom and insight and humility. If anyone can remain a student for the rest of their life, even though it's impossible, because all relationship exists in time and life is busy for all of us. And there comes a point, you know, because of age and various other things, that your interest and intensity simply diminish. It's just, these are facts of life. And then you walk away, and who knows what will happen to you. Maybe you become, you know, kind of old and senile, where nothing really matters anymore, and just live out your life until you die. But if you walk away, and you don't have that engine inside you that generates ideas, that's what good teachers do. They generate ideas. And I don't even think they themselves know why or how it's done. It's just done. Your walking away was very premature. But I don't think anyone has a choice in any of them. You know, you walk away because you're tired. You walk away because you assume too much. You know, Irina was very lucky in many ways. You know, first she's full of ideas. Then she comes to realize she has found a teacher, supposedly, but they just don't mix well. His ideas and her ideas don't mix well. You know, teachers are not supposed to bully their students, but he does. And she stays with him until he dies. And then it takes her some time to overcome the grief. Then it takes her some time to find her own community of people. And then when you watch her now and, you know, on YouTube, she's amazing. She's like a lioness, you know. That's a good walking away, Cassie. You know, I think any parent, even if they have very successful kids, when the kids walk away, they're filled with both joy and sorrow. It's, you know, it's great that our kids have graduated. It's great that they're going. It's great this. It's great that. I'm going to miss them. Why are they going so far away? Why can't they just find a job nearby? Why can't they just take over my shop? So, I think even I can't really tell you why it has taken me so long to ultimately to come to this place where I can for the first time appreciate what Hussein has done or had done. But it took all this time. And that's coming from a person who comes from the same culture as his teacher, speaks the same language as his teacher. Eventually the teacher becomes a family friend. Um, so, does that? I'm sorry. All I can say is that the three of us way back then in the 1980s were extremely lucky. Hussein, Merdad, and myself. That for us, for the three of us, if you could consider Jesus to be the embodiment of wisdom, for example, we had found our Jesus. We have found someone who embodied wisdom. We didn't care what other people said. For us, he was our layla. We could see no imperfection about him. And even if once in a while that expression, that imperfection was to reveal itself, the three of us would soon very, very, very quickly forget the entire thing. Because it didn't really matter that much. Once your vision of that person changes, then you become this lost soul. You have to roam the earth to look for beauty in a woman or in a man or in a car or in a movie. It's such a blessing to find a Costco in a single human being. You dream about him, you write about him, you talk about him. Even though you don't understand, you express his ideas in your own ridiculous, childish ways. And once that relationship changes and you begin to see imperfections, now you have to go to a library or bookstores and buy thousands of different books in hopes of finding a paragraph that can inspire you. Now you have to go to all these ridiculous, stupid talks or workshops to find some speaker out there who can inspire you. Now you have to go to all these gatherings with your friends in hopes that someone will talk about something that is meaningful and has enough depth. But everywhere you go, at the end, you realize it does it. So let's go to. I remember sitting with David one day at a coffee shop somewhere, and he called our gatherings pity parties. And I remember at a certain point we looked at each other and we said, it'd be nice to run into a boy sahib and to go to his house every day and to kind of just serve him from dawn to dusk. It's good to be able to worship something or someone, to become good at a craft. you know. And when you're not good at anything, it's kind of just buy books. And they sit there. Look at that.
Why do you call them pity parties?
He called them pity party because you know, when you have suffered a loss, you may not know what exactly you have lost, but you have lost something. You just like, you feel a little discontent, maybe unhappy. And there are no particular reasons, no reasons to why you should feel unhappy, but you just feel a little sad. And so you kind of sit in this restaurant for like 6 hours, 7 hours, and all you talk about is, in a variety of different ways, that you have lost something but you don't know what. And it would just go from one branch of life to another. It didn't matter what branch you touched. You know, that all these branches had a many number of positive components to them, but they also had some dark sides, some negative sides, sides that could lead to disappointment and sorrow. And so, with every conversation contained both joy and sorrow, laughter and tears. And in some ways, I think that is what just reflection does. That you enjoy the fact you're reflecting, you're taking something apart, looking inside of it. That it's beautiful that you have the tools to break things open. But you also begin to witness what lives inside the thing that you've just, cut open. It's like when you are young and there is this beautiful cemetery and beautiful gates, but it's locked. And it's exciting with you and your friends to, climb over the gate and just jump into the cemetery. And there is this excitement and there's this fear. Security is going to catch you. There are cameras out there, police. Jail time maybe, calling your parents. So it's both fearful and enjoyable. And then you climb over, no one has caught you, no one has you on the cameras, and you walk around the cemetery and all of a sudden you realize these are just all dead people. That this is where you're going to be buried. This is ultimately your home. And so you realize, yes, there is the excitement. Now there is this deep reflection. And then let's just say the security comes with a flashlight and says, "What are you guys doing here?" And you're just sitting there saying, "Man, I'm sorry, I didn't know what I was getting myself into." It was great to see David, and we went there almost, every other week. You go there at 10:30, 11, you get out at 7 at night. And sometimes he would come to the car wash. And he would come to the car wash and he would say, Amir, can you plan a gathering tonight? Here's a man, he teaches at a 4-year school, he's tenured, he's been there for many, many, many years. It's a beautiful wife, beautiful kids, makes lots of money. But there is an element of homesickness inside him, and he can't shake it off. And so he comes to the car wash, And then, we have gathering, we have food. 10 minutes later, the lights are turned off or dimmed, and we shouldn't play the sad music. And I think it's just part of just being human, that this continuous struggle to find something, to look for something that we can't really explain. And once you catch it, it slips through your fingers very, very quickly. It's the cause of both inspiration and sorrow. It's a place of both struggle and rest. You struggle to find it, you find it in some. It's kind of like what Plato had said, that all we can do really down here is to grab onto shadows for a few minutes, and then 10 minutes later you realize it's only a shadow. And then you say, I don't want the shadow, I want the real thing. And you realize that the only thing that you've been doing for most of your life is you just have been holding on to shadows. They just become more and more refined. They're still shadows. And there is no escape from it. And maybe Rumi was right. And maybe the Gospel of Judas is right. That the only human salvation really is when you just die. I don't know if there's an afterlife, but there is no longer this desire or this component inside us that once in a while screams discontent, unhappiness, unfulfillment. So yeah, pity party. I think even aside from, David and the gatherings and all that, there is a story, I'm not quite sure who the characters are. It's about the man walking, and he sees two dervishes on the street. And as a custom, as he passes them by, he looks at them and says, hello. But there is no reply. He turns around and looks at them and says, hello. And again, there is no reply. He turns around and says hello for the third time, and still there is no reply. And he says to them about the tradition of Muhammad, the Prophet. And the older dervish looks at this young kid and says, Adam is dead. Abraham is dead. Jesus, Moses are both dead, and so is Muhammad. You and I also are amongst the dead. Our time is short. take advantage of what little time you have and don't waste it on useless hellos. I think if you were to examine human relationship with time, there is a great amount of sorrow to be had if you were to be reflective. I mean, if you're casual in relationships, it doesn't really matter, how it goes, where it goes. If on the other hand you're serious in every little thing, it's kind of like what Ginning and her husband are doing. For both of them, it's their first marriages, and hopefully it'll be the only marriage that they'll both have. They want every little thing to be perfect. It's a serious thing. It's a serious event. In the Naqshbandi order, there is this. There are 8 principles. Not all of them are interesting. But one is called Hush dar Dam. Dam means breath. It could also be moment. It could also be present. Hush means to be reflective, to be mindful. That the only thing that separates you from your ending, from your death, is really just a moment. The next moment is a mystery. You have no idea what's going to happen. And also the breath, the spirit, especially the breath of a teacher upon a student, like the breath of God upon dirt that turns into a human being, or Eve. But, all this to say that if your relationship with time is very intimate and very serious, then you question yourself for how you're using this moment, how you're using this thing called time. Because time is not going to give you meaning. You have to give time meaning. And the sort of meaning you want to give time depends on who you are. And who you are creates desires, creates ambitions, creates purpose, creates meaning. You give time a GPS. You give time a gift. And so when you kind of look at it that way and you realize the sort of limitations that we all have. Limitations of knowledge, limitations of creativity, of excitement, inspiration, access to depth and meaning and purpose. You realize, well, you have really no choice but to just squander time. You just do what you can to make sure that from the moment the sun comes up to the moment the sun goes down, you kind of keep yourself busy, I mean, your life is really quite barren. It's empty and hollow, but you distract yourself by making sure you're very, very, very engaged with things. And then at night, you just kind of put yourself to sleep by watching a good movie, and then you kind of just collapse. And going back to Cassie's question, for those few years with Hussein, our relationship with time, our relationship with ourselves, was very intense, very unforgiving in many ways. Not one of us spared ourselves. Um, not all the time, but there was a good amount of torture. It had to do with the sort of advertisement that Hussein was imposing upon us. It made all forms of advertisement, other advertisement, kind of meaningless. Um, so yeah, there's a good amount of things to be said about, and it doesn't need to be negative, In some ways, you kind of accept the fact that there is this time. It's like this empty container, and looks at you and says, "Put something inside me. Give me something. I am time. I have nothing in me. Give me something." And you look around your house, you look into the cupboards, into the drawers, into the closets to give it something that fits it. And you want to respect it, but you realize, I just don't have anything. It's like a homeless person looking, gazing into your eyes, and you just melt. And you want to give him something, but you have no money. You have nothing. And you kind of just shamefully just walk away, But again, it depends on how you are with time. And there is much to lose when you begin to kind of think about this stuff seriously. I don't think not anyone, I don't think people take this stuff in the Gospels as seriously as they should, or they don't look at the verses as closely as they should. And maybe it's good that they don't really take this stuff very seriously, but very casually. That anyone who sits next to me sits next to fire, or I've not come to bring peace. They are so, so very true. The search for meaning, the search for identity, the search for purpose, the search. Because you'll find things to entertain yourself. That's very natural, and it's not very difficult. There are lots of things out there that are more than willing to occupy your time. But there comes a point in your life, in your own psychological development, where you say, no, I want to look for something. It's like you're attractive. Wherever you go, men come to you and give you their number, and they want to take you out and dine you and do this and do that. And you say, okay, because you don't feel any better. One day you wake up and you're no longer 20, you're like 35, and you say, man, I've gone out with like 50 men. I want someone who's decent. And now you begin to search. But your search begins with kind of seeing your past, being sad about your past, being regretful about perhaps having lost your youth to all these losers, And now your search begins. Now you're looking for things, but you don't really know what you're looking for. But you look for them nevertheless. And then most of it is theoretical, You have some theories as to what you're looking for, in a man, for example. And then someone speaks well, someone thinks well, someone has a good job. And then you say, okay, let's be roommates. And then you guys become roommates only to realize, yes, they speak well, they think well, but they suck as roommates. You know, they don't clean up after themselves. And then you say, oh, well, I guess I didn't find the right person. And then you get rid of them. And then you begin the journey again.